podcast. My name is Andy, and in a few days the Demons will travel up to Sydney to begin their campaign for the 2024 AFL season, with its premiership window still ajar on the back of a tumultuous pre-season for the club. Tonight we'll analyse our list, dissect each line, and give our predictions for the grand final and Brownlow medal. Joining me tonight to break it all down is veteran Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Ben Man. Good evening to all our Demonland listeners. And welcome to our Crystal Ball podcast tonight, where we will make all sorts of ridiculous predictions, which no doubt will come back to bite us in 6 months' time.
It always does come back to bite us. I think we usually give it a bit of a glance midway through the season, and then we, go back at the end of the year and see how well we did or didn't do. And joining us tonight as well is our resident analyst. I won't say statistician. B-Man, good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. And hopefully my prediction this year of the Pies being the most overrated football team for a long time, I still maintain it was, despite their flag. So I hope my prediction of them having a terrible season comes true, and ours of having a great season is equally true.
Well, you got that prediction last year wrong, so hopefully this year you can make amends. Each week, I do ask our loyal listeners to help us out by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. As I always say, we love the feedback and we do read it out on the show. You know, giving us 5 stars, it boosts the podcast, it brings more listeners to the show, and it drives more people over to Demonland. And then we get more contributions from more voices for the show from our audience. So the best way you can help us out is to write a review, give us the 5 stars, or you can just spread the word about Demonland to your Demon family and friends. We have another review this week all the way from Canada. Andy, not me, writes, love the podcast, lads. Living in Toronto, Canada, and being a long-suffering D supporter, the pod is a weekly ritual for me and the best way I can get a well-rounded perspective of my beloved team. Never miss an episode, and the longer the better. Oh, well, there you go, guys. Side note, did you know that the Melbourne Club song is the only one that doesn't mention the club, Melbourne, or the nickname Demons in the lyrics? Cheers, lads. Andy. Well, thanks for that bit of trivia, Andy. And I didn't know that. You learn something new every day. Did you guys know that?
Yeah, that's when you've been around as long as me, you keep getting reminded of these things. So, yeah.
And speaking of theme songs, I'm sure as historians of the footy club, you'd both be aware of the second chorus, or I'm not sure if you call it a chorus or...
Yeah, chorus, yeah.
Verse or chorus, whatever.
The second set of words that's on the...
D's played fine in the year 39.
That's the one. Kick, isn't it? How does it go?
The spirit that no one can lick. You'll find us there at the final bell with the spirit of 2666. I don't think it's kick.
That's
kick,
it.
Kick, yeah. There you go.
Very good, Andy. Very
Hope
good.
you don't get demonetised. Not that we are monetised for that one.
Surely we've got a Demonlander who can come up with better words or more modern words for us at some stage.
And an early version of the single on the flip side had was a song about O'Reilly, or what was the song on the flip side of the Melbourne footy? I'll think of it in a tick. But back from 1972, the Fantasy single.
We'll have to find that one out. From Canada over to Israel, Ellie Led writes, a great podcast, long-suffering since childhood, but after 30 years over here, my heart is still true to the red and the blue. With the advent of technology, we managed to follow games online and interesting podcasts like yours and the 𝗂𝗏𝘀𝘁𝗀. Of course, the team's recent revival has been a boost to my self-confidence, and we hope that it will be repeated this year. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Ellie. Appreciate the review all the way from the Middle East. Stay safe over there. We'll keep the feedback coming. We'd really appreciate a 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. And please don't forget to click that write a review link and write that review, as well as giving us the 5 stars, and we will read it out on the show. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Threads, and you want to leave us feedback or post a question or a comment for the show, you can post under our podcast post each week just slide into our DMs. We won't use your real name. In addition to being available on Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all your preferred podcasting apps, the Demonland podcast is available to be watched and listened to on YouTube. Just search for Demonland Podcast to find our channel. And if you want to chat with other Demon fans from around Australia and around the world, head on over to demonland.com. It's the best place to talk about the Ds, multiple topics and threads discussing all things demons related. So come on over, demonland.com, join in and join up to join in on the conversation. If you'd like to join us on the air tonight to talk about any of the topics that we're going to talk about, give us a call on 0390163666. That's 0390163666. I'll answer, put you on mute, and bring you on when there is a break in the conversation. If you're listening live, come and join us in the chat room. Head on over to demonland.com/podcast. And we'll have a look. If you've got something to say, we'll bring it up on the show. During the season, we are live every Monday. So if you want to listen to the show live, head on over to demonland.com on Monday nights at 8:30 p.m. Now, the format of the podcast might be a little different this week. Normally, we do open up the floor for from our audience for some questions and comments. And whilst we do appreciate the contributions from our listeners, and it is a massive part of the show, we aren't doing that this week. Instead, each of us, my co-hosts, will take a look at our lines, the backs, the mids, the forwards. George is going to take the backs. I'll be embedded in the guts, and B-Man will waltz into our injury-riddled forward line. We're also going to do an overview of our list in terms of age, games, contract status of key players, and Big Man's going to analyse some key stats from the preseason games, and George will give us some of his observations from preseason training. We'll then give you some of our famous predictions, as we mentioned earlier. Spoiler alert, our hit rate isn't so flash, so perhaps take them with a grain of salt. But we'll look at our predictions on which Ds will surprise, which Ds players are unnoticed. We'll predict where the Ds will finish, which opposition teams will rise and which teams will fall. We'll also give our grand final predictions. I guess they're our biggest threats for the year, if the Ds don't make it, of course, and our Brownlow predictions as well. So without further ado, George is going to take a look at our star-studded defence. So take it away, George.
Thanks, Andy. It was interesting when we were preparing the notes for this podcast tonight. I thought I actually had the easiest job of the whole lot, the backs, because our backs are pretty solid, and we've got them all available, haven't we? And then I started to look at who's not available, who's left, and things like that. So from last year, and what we suspect people will be playing in the back line and people who won't be playing in the back line. So from last year, we lost Michael Hibbert, of course, who was very important to us during the season. Angus Brayshaw played a fairly substantial part of his time on the ground in the back line. Harry Petty moved up forward in the second half of the season to try and fill the holes in the forward line. And now Christian Salem's moved up into the midfield. You start to take away those names and you go, oh, actually, how many more have we got? We've been told basically that Tom McDonald will be playing in the back line, except that he's out for another couple of weeks. Daniel Disco Turner, anywhere up to 12 weeks apparently. And then you start to put names into the slots, and there just aren't all that many. Your basic backline is fantastic. We've got one of the stingiest backlines and the most well-organised backlines in the whole league, who take great pride in keeping the defence, the numbers scored against them, down to very low numbers, which has helped us amazingly. So our backline sort of falls into lines with McVie, May, Tomlinson, Bowie, Lever and Rivers. And today we were told that Howes goes into that backline, which is just a lot, actually, given who's not available, that almost becomes a logical position, because you need someone to be able to rotate into the backline. They all can't play 100 minutes of football, so the logical one to go in there and has been positioned in there during the two practice games was Howes. That only leaves Marty Hoare and Adams outside to play at 𝗙cie. So until we get those couple of extras back in T-Mac and Turner, we don't have a great deal sort of left in the tank other than that. So we've lost a lot of talent. We've used a lot of our backmen in other roles like the Petties and and Salem now. But the good news is that the ones that we've got, the basic back six plus Howes, they're all fit. They're all in good form. We can't want any more. If they perform as well as they did last year, then we're going to be in a similar position come the end of the year.
It's interesting what you said about those. I didn't think of it either, about those players that we've taken out of the roles of the back line. And I wonder if Brayshaw obviously not being there, so he's out of there. Petty going forward and Salem to replace Gus in the middle. Yeah, I wonder what effect, B-Man, is that going to have an effect on our defence?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the thing that it was interesting again, I talked last week about the clear emphasis they had on defence coming into the games, into that Blues game. And I heard Billings interviewed on the back of his debut, and he mentioned the same thing about the focus about the defence coming into that game. And, a big part of that focus on defence is obviously mindset, but it's all the systems that go around it. And, the thing that Goody's done brilliantly is develop a system that has got those core players to control it, and then players, come into it knowing what that system is, which is why, obviously it's important, like T-Mac trains with the defence unit the whole pre-season, it sounds like. So, to learn that system. Howes in his interview today said, that they're a really tight unit down there, and they often talk about it like they're sort of a group within a group, and in particular the back line. And he mentioned that they've got such high standards down there, and he talked about learning from Bowser, and and you think though Bowser has been in the system now for, this is his fourth season, 21. Yep. So it's his fourth season in the system. So for me, it's all about that system with Lever and May obviously is the linchpin to that, and it's a matter of them slotting in and understanding their roles. And but again, it's also the all team defence is everyone playing their role, when all of those wingers and half forward flanks and utility types pushing back in defence. So no, I mean I think Adams. Did you mention Adams?
Yeah,
the Adams I think is a bit of a player to watch, and I'm guessing they're thinking for him is sort of a longer term replacement for maycie, because he's quite a big boy, Adams, and it's real pity that Turner got injured. But 44 players, you're going to be stretched in positions, I think. But I think the key thing for us is the system, and go back to the decision to get Lever and May in really were critical for decisions for the club, and it speaks to the importance Goody places on defence being the critical part of the game to get right.
The other thing, George, you mentioned T-Mac. He played in the reserves game before the Carlton game, so he is available at the moment. Well, next I'm going to be talking about our star-studded midfield. And initially when I started preparing this preview of our midfield, I had a section about what our midfield might look like without four-time Bluey winner Clayton Oliver and how we're likely to cover him for the early part of the season. However, this morning we received some fantastic news that Clary will be named in the side to take on the Swans in the opening round of the season. So that aspect of my preview is moot. So welcome back to the King. With the 2024 season just days away, the Melbourne Football Club's midfield is poised to be a crucial part of our pursuit of a second premiership under Simon Goodwin, and with a blend of experienced premiership stars in their prime and a new face debuting this week, the D's midfield unit promises to be a driving force behind our quest for premiership glory. Our captain, Max Gawn, last week showcased why he is the premier ruckman in the competition. He had total aerial supremacy, put on a clinic as he displayed a vintage performance in the ruck. His exceptional tap work in the middle provides a significant advantage at stoppages, while his solid marking capabilities provide a target all around the ground. And combined with the leadership skills both on and off the field, he is and will be instrumental and indispensable for the D's chances in 2024. And just on that indispensable part, without another ready-made and ready-to-go backup ruckman for the D's, I have sleepless nights about Max and his importance to the team. If Max was to go down, I think our chances in 2024 go down with him. 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗲 has shown some promise in the limited minutes over the preseason, but he's very raw and very far away from filling those massive shoes. Our backup rucks in Josh Schache, Tom Fullerton, and perhaps Tom McDonald, whilst capable for the 5 to 8 minutes at the end of each quarter, I shudder to think about their ability to ruck all day and adequately make up for the loss of a superstar like Max. But let's stay positive in this preview and leave the MFC assessing for things within our control. The Demons' much vaunted midfield is deep and talented, with the likes of Clayton Oliver, Christian Petrarca and Jack Viney all capable of dominating games. Oliver in particular has established himself as one of the premier midfielders in the league, and he's, with his contested ball winning ability and clearance work, among the best in the competition. He has outstanding vision and decision-making skills and always just seems to know where his teammates are and gets the ball to them in a blink of an eye. Norm Smith medalist Christian Petrarca is one of the most exciting and dynamic players in the AFL, and he's a key part of the D's success in recent years. Petrarca's combination of speed, strength and skill causes headaches for opposition midfields. He has an incredible ability to break tackles and burst through packs and just find his way to goal, and he's equally comfortable setting up his teammates. And with Oliver's return, he can also be freed up to go forward and hit the scoreboard. And my only knock on track is that his disposal at times and his yips in front of goals does let him down. And if he can improve just a little bit on on those two things, then so watch out. Highly skilled vice-captain Jack Viney brings tenacity, grunts, work ethic and leadership to the table. He's a ferocious tackler, has a reputation for being one of the toughest players in the AFL, yet despite this physicality, he's an intelligent footballer with exceptional ball handling and kicking skills. And this preseason, he has been one of our most accurate midfielders with ball in hand, getting over 90% disposal efficiency. With the retirement of Angus Brayshaw and the possibility that Clary might not have been available in the early rounds, all eyes were on Tom Sparrow to step up to the plate to carry some of the load and attend more centre bounces this season. He has shown glimpses of his potential to become a mainstay in the Demons midfield, and his practice match and his final practice match of the season was excellent when he slotted through 3 goals from his 20 possessions. And the loss of Gus from the lineup has fast-tracked the need for more midfield minutes for Christian Salem. Like Gus, Salo is a versatile player capable of playing through the midfield or across half-back. He adds polish and composure to the D's midfield group with his silky foot skills and decision-making under pressure. And in that final practice match last week, he did attend the most centre bounces of any of our midfielders. And whilst unavailable in our first match of the season, 𝗍𝗲 Pickett has once again been training and used in a dual role as a forward and a midfielder. His greatest strength is his speed and his agility, and it makes him an ideal candidate for more midfield minutes with his excellent ability to evade the opposition and use that skill to break through defences and create scoring opportunities. Having said that, this time last year we were saying the exact same thing, and despite seeing him get more midfield minutes last pre-season, he was used sparingly in the middle during the 2023 season and only made the occasional cameos at the start of each quarter. This pre-season, we've seen him attend more centre bounces and win the ball and break lines to use the ball well going into the forward 50, so let's hope that he plays more than an occasional cameo in the guts. On the wings, Ed Langdon's endurance makes him a valuable asset. Adept at finding space and providing run and carry, Langdon adds a dynamic element to the D's midfield. His ability to cover ground and provide defensive pressure, which we saw a lot more of last year, adds another dimension to the Demons midfield setup, and he's part of that all-teams defence that Big Man bangs on about. Lachie Hunter's 2024 has been curtailed by a persistent calf injury that he's had since Christmas, and track watchers have observed very little training from him in well over a month, which puts a very big question mark over when he will return. And when Hunter does return, he's going to be competing with a couple of new faces in the red and blue, with the club confirming that rookie Caleb Winsler and ex-Saint Jack Billings both will be receiving opening round debuts. A young prospect with immense potential, Caleb Winsler, is poised to make his mark on the wing in 2024. Blessed with blistering speed and excellent disposal, Winsler has caught the eye with his performances at training with the 2 practice matches, particularly the final one where he kicked 2 exceptional goals on the run. And I'm tipping that he will emerge as not just a breakout star for the Demons, but one for the entire competition. And finally, the D's acquired the versatile midfield forward Jack Billings from the Saints in the trade period. Billings adds some class, skill and versatility to the D's midfield mix. He's an experienced player who possesses an impressive skill set, and his high footy IQ and elite ball use of the ball should provide some great connection into should improve our connection into our forward 50. Now, we have lost some depth players in the midfield over the off-season, but I don't see that as hampering us in any big way unless we have a massive amount of injuries, in which case we would be cactus anyway. The loss of Brodie Grundy is well documented and leaves us vulnerable in the ruck. James Jordan left as a free agent, and no one could begrudge him seeking opportunities elsewhere. Likewise, James Harms was languishing at Casey and was traded to the Bulldogs, and Luke Dunstan could not break into the side even when we lost Clary for a large part of the season. And add to that, I think he's done his ACL late in the season, so he'd be out for a while. As for Angus Brayshaw, we discussed his loss at length in our tribute to him last week. You just can't replace his leadership and versatility that he provided in the midfield and defence. But all in all, our midfield is a formidable unit that still offers the depth as well as skill, versatility and grunt to match it with the best that the league has to offer. So that is my spiel about the midfield. Any of you have anything to add?
I was just going to say that Sparrow, if he's kicking 3 goals a week, will be happy. But that's an area, definitely, as I mentioned last week, that we can improve. And, it's an example of something that Brisbane do really well is their mids kicking goals. And not just when, I don't mean just when, like, Track goes forward and, he's essentially playing as a forward when he does that. But when Sparrow's kicking, goals or our mids. And hopefully Clary can up his goal kicking from the middle a bit. And it'd be interesting to see if _𝗟𝗨 can get some. He's an accurate kick, good skill kick. So if he gets his chances, hopefully he'll slot them, because if we can get, even 2-3 more goals a game from the midfield, I think that will go a long way. And just the other thing, I guess it sort of crosses over into what I was going to say, is about the changing nature of the midfield in the last 10 years and the importance of it. It was... When Roos came to Melbourne, you needed 10 or 11 midfielders, essentially, all pretty much of the sort of Sparrow, ilk that, in and under 10 midfielder grunts, interchangeable. And now, really, you don't need that many. You need 3 or 4, 5, 6 really genuinely good midfielders who are pure midfielders. And instead of the sort of 10 midfielders, now it's the 10 sort of what I call like utility types, sort of the high half forwards, the wingers, and sort of general, maybe back flankers as well, but I'm thinking more of the high half forwards, wingers, utility types who roll through. You're needing now 6 or 7 or 8 of those players, in large part because of the amount of running that those players have to do defensively and to set up that grid that, as you say, I keep banging on about, but we'll continue to do so. So it's quite interesting in the shift in the game in the last 10 years, and it was a big driver for us, the sort of players that we've gone out to target, who aren't just good kicks. They're obviously Billings and Windsor, they're good kicks, but it's also their athletic profile. They're able to do the sort of running and the distances at speed that that those high half forward utility types wingers really need to be able to do.
And don't give up on your MFCSS yet, Andy, because if Max goes down, we're in deep troubles. But when you look through all the other sides in the competition, there just aren't all that many good ruckmen around. And when they are, I'll use some examples. They don't generally have too much in the way of backup as a result. So you look at Brisbane, if McInerney goes down, they're in the same situation. Collingwood really haven't got a decent ruckman. Essendon Draper is a great young player, but because of his injuries, they had to go out and get Goldstein. Geelong's probably the only one with Stanley and Bleaclaves who've got 2 reasonably good ruckmen, but most other clubs, GWS with Flynn, Adelaide with O'Brien, they've gone. Most of the clubs have gone for one seriously good ruckman and break glass in emergencies for the backup rucks. So if Max goes down, it'd be terrible for us, but just about every other club's in the same boat.
Well, we do have a caller on the line. Welcome to the Demonland podcast. Who am I talking to?
G'day, Andy. It's Kieran from Canberra. How are you, mate?
Good, Kieran. How you doing, mate?
I'm very, very well.
That's good.
I don't know whether you can hear me or not.
I can hear you.
Yeah. Oh, look, I can't hear the other two lads, but sorry if I've interrupted something, but I just wanted to let you guys know we're very pumped down here in Canberra for the season. We're going along to the game on Thursday night, and the club has we've been fortunate enough to be picked by the club, so my boys will be out there as the guard of honour as the boys run out, and the excitement is at fever pitch, Andy, almost as much as me looking forward to you guys being back on the air for 2024. So, look, I can't hear you guys, but I just wanted to say thank you again for the podcast that you guys do each year, and go D's.
Not a problem. Well, thank you for the call, Kieran. I'll let you go. I hope your boys really enjoy the experience. It should be great.
It'll be great. Yeah,
all right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Good on you, Kieran.
Bye.
That was Kieran from Canberra, our good mate. He's called in a couple of times over the years, and good to see that he's in for another big season along with us. We did have, even though I didn't open it up for questions, we had a few people on the thread write a question. The Chief asks, 𝗍𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀 attending 8+ centre bounces per game looks like a no-brainer. He's almost unstoppable. It also frees him up, boosts his confidence, and is a nightmare matchup for oppositions. Have the MSC Brains Trust got the brains to make this move consistently throughout the year? Do you guys think we will see 𝗍𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 a bit more in the midfield? As I said, we did see this exact same scenario in the preseason last year, but then the season proper came and he started progressively played less and less in the midfield. Do you think that was a fitness thing? What do you think happened there? And do you think we'll see more of it this year, big man?
I think that, as we talked about after the Tigers game, I think less a pure mid that follows the ball around, more centre bounce attendances, as George has said, it's like a shock trooper. I did expect it to see more often last year. I'm not sure what the reasoning was. It's worth noting he was sort of banged up at different times last year, 𝗍𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, so maybe they were looking after him a bit. He looks a lot freer in his movement. As I said last week, he seems to have dropped a bit of that muscle in the upper chest. So I expect that they'll, well, at least I hope they do. I can't see why they wouldn't, but to use him as almost like a weapon in the midfield, 6-7 centre bounce attendances, do something special. How many did he have against? He didn't have many against the Blues, though, did he?
I don't have
two or three. So from memory, but I think that's how they'll use him, and I certainly hope they do.
I think he's a lot fitter than what he was last year. He was carrying a knee bandage for virtually the whole season last year, and we played him in the middle, usually at the first bounce of a quarter or something like that. And that was the limit of it. But I think we'll see a lot more use this year.
Yeah, I agree. He definitely looks fitter. And I went to training on Saturday, and he's moving well. I mean, not that he wasn't moving that well last year, but he definitely was. He was heavier. And I think I've made this comment at training to you, Andy, that they all look like well, not all, but a lot of the players look like they've dropped a bit of muscle mass. Steve May included, and 𝗍𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, definitely up and about. Hopefully, if they put him into the middle, it is as a weapon, and they use him at different times, because we need him, as I'll touch on in a sec. We need him close to goals to put that pressure on. He was number one tackles in the AFL for tackles inside 50 last year. So obviously, certainly our best inside 50 pressure player. So you'd love two of him, but I'm going to, when I do the forward section, I'll talk about some players in there, and 𝗍𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 was going to be one of them.
Well, now is as good a time as any, big man. You've been tasked with analysing our much maligned, at least in the media, in the wider AFL world, our forward line. We have been dealt some injury blows over the preseason. So, big man, tell me why I should not be losing any sleep, and how are we going to kick winning scores?
Well, mean, working backwards, I don't know why you'd lose any sleep anyway, even with a forward line last year that was missing, almost every player, Melksham, Petty, T-Mac, Benny Brown. We were still the second highest scoring team in the AFL. Imagine how good we'll be when we've got them all up and about. I mean, last year drove me nuts, this sort of, it was inaccuracy was the issue. And it was actually inaccuracy not by our forwards. It was inaccuracy by the tracks of the world and the players pushing forward and, the fabled connection inside 50, which is another way of saying poor kicks inside 50. I think it's much ado about nothing, our forward line. It was last year and is this year, to be honest. So for forwards, I think there's two categories of forwards. At least how I'd sort of see it, as the true stay-at-home forwards, the high half forward utility types that I've been talking about. Ironically, that sort of high half forward role that Nibbler's made his own has now become critical in the AFL. There's three subcategories, if you like, of the true stay-at-home forwards: a key position player, mediums, the medium talls, and small crumbing types. Of the key position forwards, the players in the mix are JVR, obviously Van Rooyen, Petty, 𝗟𝗍𝗯, Fullerton, Benny Brown, and T-Mac if he doesn't play back. I know he's been training with the back line, but he's flexible enough, if he's fit enough, to go forward if necessary, even within a match, I think. But the starting this Thursday night will be JVR and 𝗟𝗍𝗯 of our talls. Petty, I think I listened to Goody's interview today. He said a couple of weeks away. So
3 to 4 weeks.
He said a couple of weeks back to be playing, and a couple of weeks after that to be in the frame is how I read what he said, to be in the frame for senior selection. So, round 3, round 4 for Petty, all things being equal. I saw him at training I took a particular interest in watching him at training on Saturday. He was, I've only been to 2 sessions. The last one was maybe 6 weeks ago, and he was noticeably limping then, maybe a month ago, mid-January. And on Saturday, he was running without a limp and did quite a lot of running. So it looks in much, to my eye at least, wasn't limping. So round 3 to 4, he'll be back. So just on JVR, I just think he's a pure footballer and one of the competition stars. He'll be one of the real stars of competition in 2 to 3 years. I made a call on Demonland and touched on it last week. I think that he's arguably the best 21 and under key forward, and he's looking better by the game every time I see him and at training as well. Comparing him to the other young gun forwards in under 21 and under, the other sort of 3 standouts are 𝗟𝗻𝗄, 𝗟𝗄𝗱, and Logan McDonald. He matches them for goals. He beats or matches them for goals for each of them on average goals. He's a bit down on contested marks. The stats that for him that jump out are his disposal efficiency, 1% as a tackles. He smashes all of them, in particular 𝗟𝗚 for 1%ers. Doesn't surprise me because that's one of the things I most love about him, and George talked a lot about him, is just JVR, that is how competitive he is, and it's something that really stood out right from the get-go. And as he gets bigger and stronger, that'll give him a huge competitive advantage. 𝗟𝗚, on the other hand, has faced some criticism for not being hard at it at times. I know Dogs fans haven't always been thrilled at his endeavour, although it seemed to me he improved in that space last year. Van Rooyen, he averages twice as many tackles as 𝗟𝗚, McDonald and 𝗟𝗻𝗄. Again, that's not surprising given how competitive he is. I think it's really important because tackles inside 50 has become a critical stat. So for a player his size to attacking the ball, I think it's super important. Big one for me is that his disposal efficiency is way, way better, significantly better than 𝗟𝗚, McDonald and 𝗟𝗻𝗄, and in particular better than 𝗟𝗚. And I pick out 𝗟𝗚 because he was number 1 or number 2 draft pick, wasn't he? But he's in his career, 𝗟𝗚 goes at a woeful 56.3% disposal efficiency to JVR's 78.2%, which is pretty impressive for any forward. And, I think an area that JVR has a real edge in compared to all of those players, and the King brothers too, for that matter, is how much rucking he did last year in his full season. Those other players barely did any rucking, and what I saw of it wasn't particularly impressive. And I wonder whether that might be a factor in his sort of slightly lower average marking, contested marking, because he's gas. So I'm hoping they don't do too much of that this year. JVR's been in the AFL system for a year less than Ughelhagen, and so that really reinforces my sort of thought that JVR could go up a significant level this season, because that's what Ughelhagen did last year. And when I compared JVR's last year's season to the comparative Ughelhagen's second season, and he trounced him, not trounced him. He surpassed him in all the key metrics. So it really gives me confidence that we've got not just a real star of the competition, but that a player that's going to be pushing, Melbourne forward and being a real danger to opposition. So I can't wait to watch him this season. I'm really excited about where he's at. Our medium forwards, Fritter, McAdam and Melksham. Fritter's interesting because he in some ways he plays like a tall, but he really is a medium. Last year, Hill, McCreary, Ginnivan and Elliott were absolutely key for the Pies during the finals, and all were fantastic and big factors in the flag. But interestingly, all bar Ginnivan, the others are all more medium-size forwards, but they apply huge pressure, all of them. Cos is small, his pressure's elite. I don't think Chandler's is small, but his pressure in the finals wasn't so great, I didn't think, last year. Sparks, similarly, never really got back to his best. For me, that puts a lot of pressure on those medium forwards to really be high-pressure forward half players as well. And again, that's why JVR's sort of inside 50 tackling, I think, is going to be really important. But as it stands at the moment, it's going to be Fritter and has got the job. Hopefully, McAdam, I think Goody said a couple of weeks at least.
He said 2 weeks.
Yeah. So in the meantime,
change probably with Casey time, but yeah.
And there's talk that Melksham hopefully might be back by mid-season, around 11 or so. But in the meantime, I think Fritter's got a fair bit of importance to at the moment, because with McAdam not there yet. So hopefully McAdam can come in and take that sort of medium defender. It worries me a little bit because of the role that they use Melksham as, mitigating the opposition's best intercepting defender. So whether Fritter can play a bit of that role, hopefully he can. But, I was thinking about when I was putting this together, is Fritter the most underrated player in the AFL, was the question that came to mind. 3 years in a row, he's been our leading goal kicker, 126 games across his 6 seasons. He's kicked 211 goals in that time. Remembering 2019, he played almost the whole season in halfback flank, much to the consternation of a lot of Demonlanders. I was trying to think of similar players to compare him with, and came up with Jeremy Cameron, a player most consider a star of the game. Cameron's a bit taller and perhaps closer to a key position forward, but they're similar styles and roles. But their career averages are really similar. And with Cameron only shading Fritter in one key stat, which is average goals, 2.5 to 1.7. But again, remembering Fritter had a full season at halfback flank to sort of carve into that average. Small forwards, I think this is an area that worries me a little bit in terms of our forward line in the next little while, in the next few years. We rely a lot on Cos. Our smalls are Cos, Chandler, BDJ, Brown Dog Jr., who could also play that high half forward role, AMW, and possibly Seston, who could also play high half forward. I think that's the area we're weakest in terms of our forward line. I worry a bit about Chandler. He and AMW seems to have plateaued a bit, though there's time for him. And I think, though, countering that is Cos has been a star from the get-go, and it's really easy to underestimate his potential for future improvement. He's still got considerable scope to get better. And I don't even know what his ceiling is. So, I think it's underestimate how good he can actually become. As you highlighted last year, Andy, he compares really favourably to arguably one of the 2 best small forwards that I've seen, 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃, and certainly the other in Wiz and Jeff Farmer. So he's a star at the moment, and he's only going to get better. He's key to our pressure, as I mentioned before, in tackling inside 50. Last season, he ranked 4th in the AFL in tackles inside 50 per game, 8th in goal assists per game, 1st in total tackles inside 50, and 7th in total goal assists. They're really good numbers. As I said, surprisingly how good. He's not yet 23. He's played 85 games across his 4 seasons and kicked 125 goals in that time. That's a unbelievably good record for a player playing in a position that many say is that one of the toughest in footy, which is that small crumbing forward. And then there's our high half forward utility types. It's Nibbler, Billing for players in the frame for that role. Nibbler, Billings, Spargo, Windsor if he's not playing on the wing, Hunter if he's not playing on the wing, Laurie, Colt, who I think will ultimately become a mid. As I noted, it's become a critical role in footy. A hugely important role. Nibbler, he's got one of those roles locked in. So I think there's 4 of those roles if you include an interchange player rolling through it, and perhaps the wings as well. It seems like at the moment Nibbler's got one of those roles locked in, Billings got another locked in, and it would appear that Laurie's in the pole position for a third. If Hunter comes back in, I imagine he might play that role if Windsor locks down the wing, or vice versa. Maybe he moves the half forward and Hunter goes to the wing. That leaves Spargo, Brown, though he could also play closer to goal, the Colt and Seston fighting for, say, one spot. So there's a lot of competition for that sort of high half forward, medium player. And I would throw Chandler into the mix too, because I think he really needs to continue his evolution as a player. I won't highlight a high half forward utility type. Suffice to say, Andy, I'm ready at any stage to push back on any Nibbler myths that pop up tonight or through the season.
Well, that's I'll bring that up when and if it comes up. We got back a question from Buck Neckett said, how much will T-Mac and BBB contribute this season? Well, as we know, T-Mac's been earmarked as a defender this season, so I'm not sure how much we'll see him forward. Certainly, if it is required, he can. But what do you guys, George? Are we going to see Big Benny Brown again?
I think we'll see him. I think we'll see a bit of T-Mac. I think we'll be very fortunate if we can see 15 games out of the 2 of them for the whole season. Unfortunately, they're sort of they're at the wrong end of the age spectrum, and with the injuries that they've got, we know that Ben's got a congenital sort of knee problems. He's just not going to be able to play every week. He's been on the sidelines for the vast majority of the pre-season, and is still a couple of weeks away. So, yeah, we'll get a couple of games out of both of them, and we'll probably need a couple of games out of both of them in any case, because otherwise we're totally dependent on a JVR. So you probably got to give the guy a break at some stage.
I think of Benny Brown as, this is really dating me, but one of my favourite players as a kid from opposition teams was Snake Baker for the Roos, and famously for a couple of seasons in a row, 𝗟𝗡 brought him in come finals time, and he was a difference maker come finals. Took a screamer at my first grand final that I attended. At the same match, I think Peter Knights took a screamer as well, but Snake Baker took a screamer, and so I'm hoping Benny Brown could play a similar role.
So we're going to see a screamer from Benny Brown. That's something I'd like to see. Well, let's move into our list overview. And both Bimman and George have been studying our list in terms of age profile, games, contract status of key players. How do you want to do this? We probably should have discussed it beforehand. Bimman, do you want to start with that?
Sure. So as a general comment, again, this season on Demonland, as there is every season, there's lots of chat about how the Ds will go, of course, and whether we maintain our level or fall away. But again, as is pretty common, to be honest, there's next to no chat that we might improve. And if we do, what the drivers might be for that improvement. The alarm's going off next door. Is that coming through the mic?
Yeah, it is, but don't worry about it.
No worries. I'm really bullish about our list, particularly in terms of the demographics of the list, in terms of age, games, and the quality of the players emerging. The emergence of our 23 draftees like the Duke, players who've been around for a while like Laurie and Howes making the next step, the younger players in the 40 to 8 game bracket like Cos, Petty and Sparrow taking their game to another level means that improvement's more likely than not. And so they're definitely the areas that will improve. As I said last week, if Brown is the sub on Thursday night, Laurie plays, we'll have 10 players 22 and under in the game against the Swans. JVR, Bowser, Laurie, McVie, Howes, Windsor, Rivers, Chandler, Sparrow and Brown. That's nearly half the team 22 and under. And we'll have 2, maybe 3 players, Howes, Windsor and Brown, playing their first game of AFL footy. That's a profile usually only a team in a rebuild phase would have. And if you're in a rebuild phase, the expectation is that improvement's expected. So, I see lots of natural improvement in the Ds. In terms of the numbers, we've got 13 players 21 and under, so 29.5% of our list is 21 years and under. That's Caleb Windsor, the Colt, Brown Dog, Jed Adams, Farris White, Jefferson, Seston, Varel, Andy Manise Wakefield, Blake Howes, Van Ruin, McVie and Taj Woden. By way of contrast, the Pies, who have the oldest list in the AFL this year, only have 7 players 21 years and under. Only 15% of their list is in that age bracket. We have 10 players who are between the ages of 22 and 25, so 22.7 of our list, percent of our list. Laurie, Daniel Turner, Jake Bowie, Cozzy, Trent Rivers, Chandler, Sparrow, Spargo, Petty and Fullerton. Similar at the Pies, so a way of contrast, they've got 10 players in that bracket as well. But there's a big difference. At the Pies, the players in the 22 to 25 year age bracket have played 326 games, and our players in that age bracket have played 502 games, which is a lot of experience for that. And Fullerton's just. He's only played a handful of games. But when you think of, Spargo, Petty, Chandler, Rivers, Cozzy, Bowser, they're up to 60, 70, 80 games, those players. That's a lot of experience in players who aren't yet 25, so aren't yet at their peak. We've got 12 players in the 26 to 29, so that's 27.2%. I won't run through them all. Very similar at the Pies. They've got 13 players in that age range, and we've got 8 players 30 and over, so 18.1% of our list are 30 and over, and that's Viney, Hunter, Tomlinson, Ben Brown, Stephen May is 32, Tommy Mack is also 32, and Melksham and Gorn are both 33. By way of contrast, the Pies have 9 players over 30. That's comparable to the Ds in number, but the big difference is arguably only 4 or 5 of our over 30s are best 22 locks, whereas all 9 of the Pies over 30s are critical for them. So Cameron, their over 30s are Cameron, Myercheck, Crisp, Hoskin Elliott, Jamie Elliott, Mason Cox, Steele Sidebottom, Jeremy Howe and Scott Pendlebury, who remarkably is 36 this year. That's like a lot of their best players. Like they're all probably top 15 players, let alone best 22 players. So, all of that by way of saying that, I think demographically we've got a fantastic spread of both quality, experience and age across our list. In terms of the games spread, we've got 10 players who haven't played a game yet, so 22.7% of our list have yet to debut, but that will only be 8, maybe 7 after Thursday night if Brown Dog Jr. gets a game. In 0 to 50, we've got 10 players who've played 0 to 50 games, 22.7 of our list. 50 to 100, this is that list, that group I sort of touched on before. We've got 7 players in that group. 100 to 150, that was a bit of an anomaly. We've only got 1 player in the 100 to 150 range, which is Fritter. And this is the big one. This is why we're in the premiership window. We've got in the 150 to 200 game category, we've got 12 players. So they're players right at their peak of their game. 25% of our list is in that frame. And 200 plus games, we've got 4 players, Maxi, T-Mac, Maisie and Melksham. So only 9% of our list has played more than 200 games. So it really is, they've done a brilliant job at not allowing the sort of bubble that Geelong suffered from last year. They've had to go to the well, and they've done a good job, I think, Geelong, in bringing some young players in. Collingwood's really going to struggle because a lot of those players that I mentioned before, not Sidebottom and Pendlebury being two examples, are going to struggle to get another season out of them. So, I think we've got big scope for improvement. And I love the fact that, as I said, we've got, up to 10 players under 22 in our game against the Swans. That you've got to think we're in a good position, and no one's really talking about it, and they're not really talking about, the fact that we're very likely to improve, let alone maintain the status quo.
George, you want to jump in now with your portion of that? No,
that was all well covered. And I'll be making the same sort of points when we start talking about other sides later on in the night. Our age profile is absolutely perfect for what is traditionally called the premiership window. We're still well and truly in there, and I was going to base those other observations on teams that are going to definitely drop out simply because their age profiles are such that they won't be in it. You simply, the history of AFL football is that once you're over 30, you're on a downward spiral. Some more so than others. But as Binman said, for Collingwood, they're not going to get much more out of Sidebottom and Pendlebury, and those two players alone were absolutely critical in winning them a premiership, absolutely critical during the game. So if they don't get as much out of them next year, then they're going to drop as well for the same reasons. But we're in the right spot for the next couple of years at least. We've got the right players in the right spots. Even our older players still look like they've got plenty in them. People like Stephen May seems to be eternally fit and capable. Even Max, given that he's playing in the ruck, one of the hardest positions on the ground in terms of physical efforts required, he still looks pretty damn good, when he's running around the ground the way he's playing.
Incredible. Yeah. He looks like the tallest Tour de France cyclist I've ever seen.
No, don't go down there. We don't mention those things.
Well, he looks amazing. At training on Saturday, I was actually Whispering Jack. Shout out to Whispering Jack, was there with Andy, and we were marveling at how well he runs across the ground and covers the ground for such a tall player as well. And he looks an amazing nick. And the way we were talking about this on Saturday, the way modern footy, how well they prepare, right across elite level sports, the best players, like say in tennis, like I was mentioning Djokovic and Federer, they're playing to, their late 30s. I know they're not tennis, for instance, not a contact sport, but it's incredibly demanding aerobically and the work they do. So I think, there's nothing to think that, what was it, McInerney, is it?
From Brisbane?
No, not McInerney. What's the ex-Roos player who's gone to Bombers?
Goldstein.
On the way. Yeah. He's like 36, 37, still running around now. There's no reason to think we won't get another 2 years of very elite football from Maxi. Maisie's the one that bothers me a little bit because he's had that the last 2 or 3 years, the issues with the glutes and lower back. But to my eye, he looks a bit fresher than I've seen him for 2 years, I reckon.
And he still keeps playing regardless of that.
Yeah. And you're going to touch, George, on the contract?
Yeah, we will later on if you want, or now. Or
I was going to do it now, but I was just wanted
to. All right.
Yeah,
I can go to that. I'll run this slightly differently with the contracts and the age profiles and things like that. Maybe you two guys can come into this and simply go keep, go, or maybe as I work through them. So first of all, a shout out to Lucifer's Hero and also Red and Blue Forever, who have kept these lists for us to the benefit on Demonland. But we'll start working with them. Jed Adams, who's and the ages are at the end of the contract, so at the end of this year, basically. Jed Adams, who's 20.
Yeah, look, we've got to keep because we haven't seen what he can do yet, and he's sort of the replacement for May, I guess, down the track. So at the moment
as well.
Okay, he's a keeper. Ben Brown at 32.
Well, I would say at the end of his contract, given his knee issues, he's got to go.
Yeah.
And thank you
Lockie.
for his service. He was instrumental in the premiership. So, yep.
Lockie Hunter.
Look, it all
Are these players
depends.
coming out of contract at the end of the year, George? Sorry.
Yeah, at 30.
Yeah. So it all depends on what the status is of his calf and when he comes back from this issue. What happens with Windsor and Billings, who are the other guys on the wing? So
So is he a maybe? Or
I'd say yes.
Maybe it's a maybe, but if he's back to his bed or best or thereabouts, then
But
yes, I would.
Keeping in mind that you need, like I said before, that's exactly that type of player that you need, 8, 9, 10 of now in footy, as opposed to 10 years ago when you needed 8, 9, 10 mids.
Next one, Ed Langdon, 28.
Yeah,
definitely keeper.
So he's a keeper. Next one, Bailey Laurie at 22.
Depends what happens this year.
He's got to show us this year.
Okay, so a maybe for him.
They had good raps on drafting him. Let's see what he can do.
Yeah. T-Mac at 32.
You would think
Probably
that's the end of T-Mac. And
T-Mac
we wrote him off, right? Sorry.
I love T-Mac and as well, instrumental in the premiership season. So forever a premiership hero.
Josh Shackey at 26.
Got to show us this year what he can do, but it's a maybe.
Yeah, and also the other part of it is that, as we've talked about a lot over the years, is that you still need decent players at 𝗙cie level to replicate the systems and structures that you have at senior level. So, you need a decent ruck, you need a decent key forward. So, it's a bit hard. It depends on who we bring in and those sorts of things. But
so a maybe?
Yeah, I'd say maybe for sure.
Joel Smith at 28.
But might be out of our hands.
Right, I've scrubbed him. Tom Sparrow at 24.
Well,
yeah, absolutely.
The news today, and I don't know if it was just a clickbait article, but from John Ralph, saying the Crows have set their sights. Adelaide have expressed interest in luring Melbourne's emerging midfield star Tom Sparrow home as he holds off contract talks until he established his role in the club's star-studded midfield. Sparrow is likely to re-sign with the Demons, but Angus Brayshaw's sudden medical retirement has put a premium on the 23-year-old signature at Melbourne. Sparrow was taken at pick 23 in the 2018 national draft, blah, 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 blah. So I think it was a bit of a nothing article.
Surprised it didn't come from Kay Corns.
But yeah, so look, Adelaide have interest, but will be
of course they would.
Pushing hard to get his signature this year, and
but he's definitely a keeper from Apple.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Adam Tomlinson at 31.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends really. Again, as to what partly on where Jed Adams is at. So yes, I would say. I mean, good. Also a good football. Although he's on a pretty good contract at the moment, I think, from memory, Tomo. So he might need to take a haircut.
It might be like a 1 year.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. Moving on to the rookie list, which is quite extensive. Kynan Brown, of course.
Brown Dog Jr. He's a lock.
Keep him for another year. Marty Hoare.
Yeah.
At 28.
A stopgap. So. He'd probably be on a year-to-year type proposition. See
another
what happens.
maybe. Yep. Melcham at 33.
At the end of this year, he comes out of the
year. Yeah.
He'll probably retire himself.
Yeah. Okay. We're scrubbing him. Judd McVie is actually on rookie still, but he's okay to 2025. Will Varell at age 20.
Well, we sort of have no choice. We need to.
Yep. Oliver Seston at 20.
Yeah,
I like the look of him. Let's see what he can do this year. I'm not ready to.
Okay. Kaya Farris-White at 19.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a tick. And the last one, Andy Moniz-Wakefield at 21.
Well, again, he's a bit like a couple of the other players. A lot will depend on what he does this year. He's one of the players in the category that we'll talk about later about players I'm a bit worried about we're a bit worried about, and I think he's got to bring his game to another level this year. Otherwise, he might find himself on the outs.
So he's another maybe.
If he can't this year, I would say that the club might let him go. But
So at the end of 2024, we've got 4 players who we've already put a line through effectively, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 maybes. So,
and we'll have a fair bit of money in the salary cap, and even without the situation with 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀𝗁. So
yeah, I think that this is the eternal problem. If you're putting a line through 4 players, your next pick after that to fill the 4th pick, you're already looking at the 70s.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the draft.
In terms of the draft, yeah.
But it sort of goes back to what I was saying about our we aren't really under much pressure in that space because of how well balanced our demographics is, and how well Taylor and the rest of the recruiting team have done it, ensuring that there's not a bubble. Even position wise, we've got ruck is Max is important, but we've got options in almost every position, multiple options. So I think that Laurie's a good example. We were having this similar conversation last year, and Laurie was a player that he was a bit of a make or break, still is, I guess. But we're quick to write off players in the AFL now, I think, to an extent, because so many good young players like 𝗟𝗍𝗄 and others come in and they're competitive from the get go. But history says that a lot of players take time to find their feet.
Yeah. The good thing is that while we put the line through 4 players, that's pretty typical.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, a couple of years ago, George, you were making the point about how you were worried about our depth, about a number of players in sort of that we didn't have quality coming through. And back then, if we think like Howes is in his 4th season, isn't he, or third or fourth?
Third. Yeah.
There was a question mark on whether he would make it. There was a question mark on whether McVie would make it, who was a rookie. There was certainly a question mark on, I guess AMW is the only one that sort of got that same sort of question mark. So once, we're back in the old day, we were one of the worst clubs at developing players. That's always was a fair criticism of the Ds, and I don't think that criticism can be levelled at the club anymore. We've done brilliantly under Goody at ensuring players have got their best shot at developing to their potential and meeting their potential.
The other consideration, I think, did you talk about Petty?
No.
When does Petty come out of contract?
Petty is 2025, at which stage he will be 25.
And a free agent.
Yeah.
What was the talk? Remember Adelaide were...
Well, they were just coming after him.
Yeah, they were just putting
Then there was the talk, well, no, we're going to hold you to the contract, which I thought was up at the end of this year. That just given the...
No, I think it's 25. I remember that being written about, but it's like, do you want a player at the club who said he wants to go? You keep him at the club, I reckon. I really like the way the D's handle that.
But if he comes at the end of the year and says he wants to go back to Adelaide, we would probably...
Well, then we've got the leverage. Well, then it's a bit different because the following year he goes into free agent, we lose some of our leverage, which is what the talk about. One of the problems with the free agency is essentially, a year out, you end up having to have the conversation and the issue of leverage gets muddled up.
Well, the article about Sparrow talks about Petty a little bit, but the stuff about it talks about the Brayshaw money, and it says Melbourne is still in talks with the AFL about whether they can exempt some or all of Brayshaw's salary for the next 4 seasons after he was medically retired by the AFL. He's due more than $3 million in a deal to 2028, with Demons football boss Alan Richardson confident the AFL will work with the club on a resolution that helps the Demons' cap picture. Finding a way to place some of his salary outside the cap will help in the retention of Sparrow and Petty.
A simple solution to that, they should bloody take it out of the pies cap.
Got to love the AFL making the rules up on the runs.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
Given we've had what's the fella's name from Brisbane that retired? Marcus Adams, and McCartan now retired,
Yep.
and there was a third player last year. It's again my point about these things are predictable. Why haven't they sorted this stuff out? Why isn't it clear?
Absolutely.
Why do we have to now have doubt and question marks over what, once again, how can, where, as a footy club, we're impacted by the AFL not having its act together. It's so frustrating. I mean, players are retiring, and God, there might be another one for Simpkin. His third serious concussion in less than 12 months. You reckon they might have some of this thought through already?
I think they were a little bit burnt by the Buddy Franklin situation that, when he was first signed up for 10 years for $1 million a year.
Well, worth every cent, and made it the whole way, didn't he? So.
Yeah, but the AFL came out at the start and said his salary will be kept in your salary cap for the whole period.
Yeah.
And now it's come back to burn them. But again, why haven't they thought this out or put some conditions about it? What sort of medical situations might arise? That's what they get paid the big money for in AFL House, but they don't seem to do it. So,
all right,
anyhow.
Let's move on. B-Man, you're going to give us a brief overview of some key post-2023 stats and what they point to in terms of our game plan and method for this season, and then connecting them from the stats from our 2 preseason games. So take it away.
Yeah, so in terms of the overall set, so at the end of the home and away season, and this is just a rating system. This is Champion Data's rating system, and thanks to Wheelo, I'm grabbing it from Wheelo's excellent website. Yes, we went out in straight sets last year, so that's a given. But from a statistical point of view, we finished the last year's season rated the number 1 team in the AFL. Yes, I can hear people saying we didn't win the flag, but statistically on the AFL team ratings, the top 8 were in order: Melbourne, Brisbane, Collingwood, Giants, Adelaide, Sydney, Port Adelaide, and Carlton. And the way they come to that is a rating for attack and a rating for defence. And people will remember if they watched 360 or On the Couch or any of those shows last year, they had that big graph about plotting it out where you are on attack and defence, and basically the teams in order to have a genuine chance at the flag had to be top 6 or 7 in defence, and at least top 10 in attack. We were number 1 ranked team last year in defence, plus 12.5 points, number 1, and we've been number 1 for the last 3 seasons. I've got a vague memory Geelong might have been close to us in the season before that. And we were ranked 8th in the AFL for attack. You put those 2 things together and you get Melbourne being the top-ranked team, as I said, Brisbane second. I think that ranking, if we kicked a goal more a game, we'd be up around the 2 or 3 on the ranking for attack. So, we don't have to improve much in that space to, be an even more dominant team. I think, all indications are that we'll maintain our ranking for defence. And if we can increase the amount of times that we hit inside forward 50 kicks, which is why we brought Billings to the club, which is why we brought Windsor, we've drafted him. We targeted players like Colt as well, Laurie in previous years, Bowser with high elite kicking skills, with Salo playing forward centre more often. I think Howes will free up McVie to be a bit more aggressive and get up the ground and also be delivering it inside 50. I think that our attacking ranking will go up significantly. So I think they're all positive signs for this season. Just in terms of the game style, I've talked this a bit, but the games really involve turnover. Scores from turnover are now the critical scoring. The way teams score, 70% of scores are from turnover. 10, 15 years ago, it was all about stoppages. Now it's all about creating turnovers, pressuring and winning it back, ideally winning it back in the front half. What I would say is that this time last year, on the back of the way Collingwood played with that faster transition off the halfback flank, a lot of talk about that. But come finals, every team, as I've talked about as well, pretty much adopted our game plan, in particular the Blues, Giants and Pies. My sense is now clubs essentially employ two styles, game styles a season. The home and away method, there's more variation between the clubs with this method. But come finals, as I said, they all reverted to a sort of similar way to what we play. The home and away model is faster, more attractive to watch, to be honest. The goal is to win games, I think, obviously, but the secondary goal is to not get to finals completely banged up. The finals and any high-stakes, high-pressure games during the season, like our last home and away game against the Blues, involves forward, the method is forward half, get it inside 50 as quickly and directly as possible, keep it there, hence the hated long bomb often. Transition footy, brutal football, insane pressure, huge tackle numbers. That's the template for modern finals footy. It's really the model that I think the Tigers brought in. That's the Tigers template with a tweak. And the tweak is that transition off halfback flank. It's still super important to have high quality kicks, and that definitely was the Pies' strength in terms of, the more pressure is, the greater the demand on the technique. And it's the model that's won every flag since 2017, bar the 2018 Eagles win. And that was only after the Tigers, who were raging favourites, got rolled by Mason Cox in the prelim. Just as an example of the different ways those two game styles play out, everyone loved this time last year in the first third of the season how attacking the game was, and how many games teams scored over 100 points, or a number of games where two teams scored over 100 points. And, the AFL loved that and fans loved that. But come finals, and the Pies were the team that everyone pointed to as such an exciting team. But come finals, in the three finals the Pies played, their average score was 69 points. In the three finals the Blues played, they averaged 69 points. On the back of easy kills against the Saint and Port, whose both defences are completely woeful. The Giants averaged 83, but could only score 57 points against the Pies in their brutal smackdown game that the Pies were lucky to win. We averaged 62 points in our two losses. The Lions were the outlier, averaging just over 100, but that was padded by completely smashing the defensively woeful Port. If you take out that game, they averaged 82 in their other two finals. And for what it's worth, I think they've got the most attractive style. They look to their style is probably the outlier in a way. So only the Lions averaged more than 100 points in the finals. And that was the benchmark for a decent score during the home and away season. So, they're really two different styles. That said, we will, Goody, we talked about it in that clip last week from Goody. He, like you said, all teams are looking to move the ball fast off the halfback flank. What we are doing is to, I think, really look at our defensive model and to stop teams basically moving the ball and transitioning it halfback flank. I, as I noted last week, I think it's really interesting the sort of going back to and reiterating that our DNA is defence. So I expect that we'll be looking to, maybe be a little less aggressive than we were in the first third of the season and really focus on stopping the opposition transitioning the ball. But, what that means is that hopefully we'll get more slingshot action ourselves when we do win it back, and we can take advantage of those players that I mentioned. Just another stat on the Demonland. I'll just bring it up now. There's a poll that I put up a few weeks ago about the D's finishing position. Let's see, where is it? I should have brought this up before. And I can't see it right at the moment, but with about 180 people having responded to the poll, about 45% say we'll finish top four, about 22% say we'll miss the 8, and about 42% are saying we're going to finish 5th to 8th. So, that's pretty good. Quite a few people concerned that we'll miss the 8, but, a surprising number of people think we'll also continue to be a strong team and finish top 4.
Thanks for that, Bin Man. We'll now go on to pre-season training observations, and over the pre-season, a number of Demonland track watchers either headed down to Gosh's paddock or made the long trek out to 𝗪𝗂. Well, not so long if you live up there, to bring you their observations from training. Amongst those track watchers were you, George, and yours truly, me. But before we get into some of your own training observations, George, from this pre-season, I wanted to give a shout out to our fantastic track watchers that have been very busy this year, this pre-season, and provided an invaluable service to those of us who are bound to their desks. The reports that we receive really do paint a picture of how the team is travelling and what the potential game plans might look like, who's in the rehab group, and much, much more. So thank you to the following people in no particular order. Thanks to Picket Fence, Kev Martin, Slarty Bartfast, Werry D, Hawk the Demon, Walking Civil War, Scoop Jr., Demon Wheels, Clinico, Wayne Russell, D's Man, Old 55, Jonty, Nascent, Despicable, D Spencer, Gaundy the Great, 𝗟𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗃, Back Pocket, Stinger, Ditcher, Joe Boy, Breno, Matt Demon, D Zephyr, Friendly Fellow, Tough Kent, and of course you, George. That's 29 Demonlanders who have taken time out of their day to report their observations from training, and that's just an incredible it's just incredible. So thank you, and a massive shout out to all those wonderful people. Just another reason for any listeners to this podcast who aren't on Demonland or don't follow us on social media to get on board and don't miss out on this amazing preseason intel that we get every year. So with that out of the way, George, take it away with your preseason training observations.
It's very difficult when you go to training to actually work out what they're trying to do or trying to implement, and so you spend a lot of time going, what's all that about? Anyhow, I've sort of put this together based on what I've seen in the practice matches, not just ours, but watching other teams as well. The one major observation I think we're going to see in the season proper this year is based around, there's very obviously a difference between the top teams and the bottom teams, roughly. Put a line through the middle of the competition. You won't be able to switch against the top team anymore. It just doesn't happen. The reason it doesn't happen is because, as we've seen, particularly with our side, the backs and the wingers are running so hard that you can switch with probably 2 to 3 kicks across the ground. By the time you get it across the other side of the ground, the defence is already set. So trying to switch becomes a waste of time. The lower teams, you can get away with it, or they try to do it, and then they find out that they can't go anywhere with it. So for the top teams, we're not going to see the switches we've seen happen before. You don't see out the back football like we saw just a couple of years ago, again because the defence sets up so well, the systems that are in place and the athleticism of the people, particularly the wingers who are covering off huge amounts of ground to stop that initial movement when the opposition get hold of the ball. So what I've noticed happening is that in order to transition the ball through the defence, there's a lot of what I'd call zigzag motion. So the ball comes into the middle, goes out, comes into the middle again, goes out. And I think what the coaches are trying to do is move the zone, make them go left, make them go right, so that holes open up in the forward line structures. We've already seen as we go, even in our practice matches, as we go into the forward line, the ball moves. You've got so many more options because the ball could be coming through the middle or it might be coming from the sides initially. Space has opened up, but it's because the teams are moving the ball sideways a lot more as they transition from one end of the ground to the other. The Collingwood model of moving it quickly is undoubtedly what everybody else is going to be doing this year, and we're doing the same thing. If somebody in the back line has it from whatever position it is, the ball moves really quickly.
But forward, that's the key, as you say. It's got to go forward, because if it goes sideways, then it just plays into the opposition's defensive grid, which is that defensive grid. Goodwin should get credit for really, it was in place, but he really took it to another level, and now all teams really need to have something similar.
And the players who play in the back line, you can't afford to hold the ball and go looking for an option to kick. you've got to actually keep moving. So we'll talk about it, the players that we've got, but when you watch Rivers and 𝗟𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗃, they never stop. They're constantly moving. If you take a mark or you get possession or an intercept, you've got to keep the ball moving. Like I said, it becomes a zigzag pattern as it moves up the field. It moves extraordinarily fast compared to what we're used to. So it's going to be exciting to watch. And I think you're going to see some blowouts in the season proper, because, like I said, there's almost a differentiation between the teams. Some teams that I've watched in the practice matches are still playing football from 2, 3, 5 years ago in some cases, and they're going to get really exposed by this type of football. It's going to be great for the teams that employ it, and we're going to be one of those. But that was the major takeaway that I saw. I remember one training session, Jake Lever was shouting instructions to 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗁 at the time very early on to get wide, stay wide, keep wide, because he was the option. You're not just defending, you're the option to get out. So when I get the ball, you need to be out there to the side of me so that you can move the ball quickly up the field. So expect to see a lot of that quick movement that starts sort of in the back line.
And that model is really what was in place last year. But the interesting thing at come finals is that with that defensive grid, when it works well, is that zigzag you're talking about, the very refined systems, they've got a player to the player that's about to zig to, if that makes sense. So they understand the patterns of the opposition's ball movement and instinctively moving a player to that spot. And one of the interesting things about that Blues game that we talked about it last week was how open we left the corridor, particularly given Princess Park is a small ground, basically challenging Carlton to take that on. Should they want to transition that way, they can, leave the corridor open. But, they very rarely, even in a practice game, chose to. And it really does put a huge emphasis on, the skilled kick. But that's why that game plan was still being used in the finals last year. But once the pressure's up, it comes sort of smashing into the forward line, and the defences are so good that, it's still better to get it in the front half, because that's where if you get a turnover, you're more likely to score than if you get a turnover in the back half. But come finals, it becomes very difficult to even sort of penetrate that forward line. I'm so pleased that the critical thing that the Pies have brought into it is that elite level kicks. Those players that I mentioned before, 3 of them, side bottom, Pendlebury, are both elite level kicks, and then you chuck in Dacos and Crisp as well, who's over 30. We've now got in this lineup against on Thursday. If you consider Laurie's an elite kick, Billings is an elite kick. We've got 2. Then Howes is a pretty neat kick. I'm not quite sure about elite. George, you've seen him more often. What's his kick? How would you rate his kicking?
Haven't seen him doing enough of that style of things. Bowie's another one.
Bowie, and then Salo, and then Hunter. And you don't really need more than 5 or 6, truly elite kicks. It's just that we haven't had that number of elite kicks. But I think we're much closer now than we have been.
All right, well, I think it's prediction time, and we should put a disclaimer on this segment that past performance is no guarantee of future results. But having said that, our past performances in predictions have not been stellar, so gamble responsibly. We're going to start with the D player to surprise. Buck Neckard asked the question, who will be the biggest improver? Who is your biggest smoky to be a regular? Well, mine won't go talking regulars yet, and I think the easy pick here would be to go with 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗁, who we've seen some very positive glimpses of in the pre-season, which has rewarded him with an opening round debut. However, my pick for the Demon to surprise this season is our other high draft pick and Demonland's newest sponsored player, Colton Tolstrup. I've been very impressed with what I've seen from Colton in my forays to Gosh's paddock over the pre-season. He has mostly played in a forward role, and he just looks like a player who is ready-made and for AFL footy. Having already played senior footy in WA, he has an AFL-ready body. The kid has a powerful frame. He has a strong mark. He can pinch hit in the midfield, as we saw in the dying stages of the practice game the other week. He will start the season at 𝗟𝗄𝗯, but I would not be surprised if he does debut this season. And I reckon it may be earlier than we perhaps would expect, not obviously in the first few rounds, but certainly not in the latter part of the year. So let's just watch this space. Bin Man, your player to surprise.
I had a few players that I was thinking about that might surprise me. I thought of Howes, Turner. I'm waiting for him to go into overdrive. Varel and possibly Adams might surprise. I think that he's got a big future. One I've landed on though is Laurie because I think he might surprise me because I wonder whether I've been guilty of underestimating him a bit. The reason I say that is I feel like perhaps I developed a set against him. And perhaps that's because I was surprised they picked him ahead of 𝗟𝗯𝘀𝘁 late last year, and therefore maybe I underrate him because of that. Like I said, after the Tigers practice game, I was really surprised that he had 17 possessions, less surprised that he got 17 against the Blues, but he seems to have the knack good players do of accumulating disposals unobtrusively. I've always liked that. Junior McDonald was a player who got numbers and always at the end of the game. The two Lover boys were similar. I think, how did they end up with 25 possessions? But crucially, he doesn't waste them. He's a neat kick, reliably hits targets. He makes good decisions, sort of doesn't try to take things on outside his, like T-Mac used to do down back, take things on that were too high risk. I think he's competing with Spargo, who's also a good kick, but I think it's fair to say the knock on Spargs is that he probably doesn't get enough of the pill. The other thing about Laurie that makes me think that maybe I underrate him a bit is the coaches and Goody obviously think really high of him, as evidenced by the fact they chose him ahead of Spargs last year, and he's in the frame already for this year. And of course the coaches and have all the GPS and other data and that we don't have access to. And on that, we talked. He looks like he's really fit. He's really fit this season. He looks like he's slimmed down a fair bit. And as we talked a number of times, we've seen how effective against the Blues, how effective our all-team defence grid is, and that how challenging it is for teams to move when we're on in that space. That defence requires just so many players, but particularly those high half forward utility types like Laurie, Nibbler, Langdon, Sparrow, Hunter, Windsor, requires them to run all game and get to the right spots. So heaps and heaps of unrewarded running. So they need discipline to be able to do that. They need obviously a good tank as well as that discipline, ability to cover the ground. All of those attributes are hard to see. Like they're hard to sort of watch a game of footy and sort of think which of those players has those attributes, which is partly why I think Nibbler's always been underestimated a bit. And I'm guessing Laurie has got those skills because that's why he's in the frame for selection. So for me, he's the one that I think could certainly surprise me.
George, who's your player that's going to surprise this season?
I've got one slightly different who's not a bad player at the moment, and that's Trent Rivers. And the reason being that with Salem moving into the midfield, somebody's got to sort of pick up the slack, although it's not really slack, in the back line. And I think we saw glimpses of it in the Carlton game where he becomes a critical factor in the way that the ball's driven out of that half-back line. He has a superb long kick. And as we're talking about, the ability to move the ball quickly and over decent distances out of the back line is basically where you set your attack up from. He's already that player that runs past ready for the handball because he can deliver the ball so far up the field. So I think we'll see a blossoming of Trent Rivers and taking over a role. Salem's role in the halfback line tended to be more short type kicks. He was always very accurate and always found his man. There was no question of that. But these days you can't afford to do short kicks in that scenario because the defence sets up so quickly that you've got to move the ball quickly and move it as quickly as you possibly can up the field. So I think we'll see a real blossoming from Rivers in this coming season.
And Rivs is another one that he's only 23 and only just turned 23, I think. So 77 games under his belt already. his best football is coming now from this point for the next 4 or 5 years. And another player, who gives me reason to be confident that we've got lots of improvement left.
All right, we're going to move now to D's players that are on notice, and my D's player on notice is Lachie Hunter, and I don't say this from an ability perspective. We know that at his best, Lachie's a smart, experienced winger that has the ability to find the ball and use it very well. However, over the preseason, he has struggled to overcome that persistent calf complaint that has seen him miss a big chunk of training that no doubt will impact his physical fitness. That we've mentioned that if you don't get to do a big block of preseason training, it's going to affect you down the track in terms of your endurance, and endurance is a big part of his weapon. So I'm wondering if missing such a huge chunk of the preseason is going to affect that. But in the meantime, young and energetic Caleb Windsor has come in to stake a claim on the wing, and with the acquisition of Jack Billings into the team, it's really going to make spots on the wing very competitive. But from a team perspective, I guess that's a very good thing. But so Lachie Hunter's got he's got some people breathing down his neck, ready to take over that spot. So watch this space. George, who have you got as your player on notice?
I've gone for Andy Moniz Wakefield. We were talking about contract status before, and that's sort of one of the negatives, or one of the swords of Damocles that's hanging over his head, is that he's on the rookie list and he's out of contract at the end of this season. So he's got to show something this year, because he may well not have a next year. This is his third season at the club. Still yet to play a game. He kicked 20 goals at 𝗚cie last year, but his difficulty is perhaps a little bit similar to James Jordan, in that who's he going to replace? In his small role, is probably a small forward or even a mid, but he's up against people like 𝗍𝗲 and McAdam when he becomes available. The fact that the coaches chose another rookie, Kynan Brown, in the practice matches to come onto the field ahead of him doesn't bode well for him. You've got to show something when you're a small forward. You've got to have something different. You've got to have something special about you. So, yeah, he's right up against it this year, I think.
He seems to have the X factor a little bit. I mean, just he's got the tank is the issue. Is, again, even those small stay-at-home forward player, I mean, they all need unbelievable tanks these days. I mean, I've seen him display really good skills, but he was on my he was one of the players that I had on that same sort of thought about, on notice, if you like. The other one was Sparks, a favourite of mine for a long time, but really just exactly as Andy was just saying, for the same reason as Hunter's got, he won't find it easy to break back into the side potentially if Windsor really sort of demands a spot on the wing, for instance, and Billings is playing well, because then if he does come into the side, Hunter, that is, it will have to be to a high half forward role. And that's where Sparks is in the mix for that role as well. So Sparks is that high half forward. Maybe he can also play as small forward, but really his go is kicking inside 50, being a half forward flanker who gets up and down the ground. So at the moment, Laurie's ahead of him. So he's his injury. When's he back, Andy? It's a couple of months as well.
Lachie Hunter?
No, Sparks.
Sparks? We don't know. So they mentioned a couple of players today, but they didn't mention anything about Sparks, and they didn't mention about Ben Brown. However, it looked like from some of the pictures today that Melbourne released that Ben Brown was training, and that's the first I've seen of him training in a Melbourne jumper. We've seen him training sort of in the T-shirt and runners and doing a couple of things on the boundary line, but it seems that he might have been in training today. So Ben Brown might be back, but Sparks, I don't know.
So bad time for Sparks and Hunter, both to not be fit, basically, because Sparks might find it hard to get back into the game. If Laurie takes his chance, there's a lot of players sort of in the mix for that sort of medium forward, high half forward role, I should say, not medium forward. So, yeah, he's one of my favourites, and it would be sort of obviously extremely difficult, difficult for him, having been a premiership player and then struggling to get back into the team. So we'll see what he does. I think the thing for Spargs is he's got to get more of the footy. And that's something that, as I said, Laurie is, he's pretty impressive in terms of his ability to rack up numbers. So, Spargs has got a bit of work to do to force his way back into the team, I suspect.
So let's get on to our predictions of where we think the Ds are going to finish. So this is a tough one for me. We've had the off-season from hell. We've had injuries, retirements, off-field troubles, questions about our culture, you name it. With all of that, will all of that impact us on the field? Will it galvanise the group? There's an enormous amount of pressure on this team. Can they rise above the external noise? Will this be the downfall of the team that was tipped to create a dynasty after the 2021 drought-breaking premiership? I believe and I hope that the reports of our death have been greatly exaggerated. I still think we have a list that can match it with the very best in the league. But my MFCSS still nags away at me and gives me pause and makes me doubt our credentials at times. I can see us finishing anywhere from top 2 to actually missing out on the finals if things don't go our way. So I'm going to meet myself halfway and say we finish 5th at the end of the home and away season. But I do think we can compete for that top echelon, but a lot of things have to go right, and some of that has to do with injuries as well.
More hedging than a Caulfield Street there, Andy.
Absolutely. I'm sitting right on the fence there.
Top 4 for me, best list in the AFL. As I said before, fantastic demographic spread. I love the fact that they've targeted elite kicks and brought them in. Caleb Windsor's a top 7 draft pick and looks every inch a top 7 draft pick. JVR is going to take his game to a next level. I think his impact has been really underestimated in the footy world. Top 4 again, and we'll reload and see where we go in the second season, which is the finals.
George, what side of the fence are you sitting on?
You summed it all up, Andy. At top 4, and it all depends totally on injuries, which is what has cruelled us so badly in the last 2 seasons. Last year in particular, as we went into finals, we had a non-existent forward line, and we lost 2 finals by a total of 7 points.
And luck. You can't predict either of those things, injuries or luck. Yeah. We're actually doing, on the injury front, we haven't talked about it, but our injury status is not looking nearly as bleak as what some might have had it 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Well, 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was looking very bleak. There was
not as bleak as what, because no one really missed a block. Only Melk and now Turner are the only ones that are out for any significant amount of time.
Yeah.
And
couple of weeks ago, there were a lot of players on the injury list, and we didn't have much information in terms of time frames when they were back. So when you just looked at the list, and it all was TBC, just because we didn't have anyone.
But we knew that they weren't major injuries, and they'd got their kilometres in the leg. So a bit of perspective on that. At the Pies, Pendlebury and Howes have both had interrupted pre-season. They're touch and go for round 1. The best forward, McStay's out for the season with an ACL. Kruger's did a bad hammy. He's out for a big block of time. At the Swans, Luke Parker has broken his arm. The captain, Mills, is out to mid-season after wrecking his shoulder wrestling on Mad Mondays. That's huge for them. They've, Lloyd, Papley, Warner are all under some doubt against us. The Blues have got Walsh and Wiedering out, interrupted pre-seasons. Several other players in the same boat. Williams is coming back from his ACL. So a lot of the contenders have got much worse injury situations than us. So, I think these fans often seem to look at it in a bubble as if other teams aren't, got their issues. But
we've still got the list, but it totally depends on who's available for the majority of the season and come finals time. There was very little difference, as you pointed out before, between the top 4 sides at the end of last season, and we just missed out quite literally.
With a third of our best 22 not playing.
Yeah.
So, of course, goes without saying that the top 4, assuming that we don't have massive injuries or a massive run of bad luck.
All right. Buck Naked had a comment about this, and he says, I'm bullish about this season. Top 4, us, Giants, Bears and Pies. Suspect we turn 5-1 at the bye. So, and we do have the first couple of weeks are going to be crucial, I think, because I think we've got a pretty tough draw. Going to Sydney in the first weeks, always tough. Bulldogs, I know nothing about. You never know with the Bulldogs. And then we've got the 2 games in Adelaide, back to back with Port Adelaide, and then gather round to Adelaide, and then come home to play Brisbane for our fifth match before the bye. I think we've got another match after that. But it's.
It is crucial. Like, there's not. I mean,
wins early, as you always say, big man.
Absolutely. I reckon, top 4. What everyone can agree on is that realistically, you don't win a flag from outside top 4. Like, the exceptions just prove the rule to that. And so we've got to finish top 4. That's the number one priority. And then, as I said, reload. And critical to finishing top 4 is banking early wins. I think we've got to be something like 6-2 after 8 games. And so whilst this game isn't in of itself, be all and end all, that first block of games, 6-2, as you said, there's some tricky games in there, especially having to stay in Adelaide twice, playing back-to-back games in Adelaide Oval. 6-2 would be a fantastic result, even 5-3. So I think there is, for a whole range of reasons, the first third of the season is super critical every year that is how it pans out. After 8, 9, 10 rounds, basically the top 8 is set, roughly, give or take it. And so, it is crucial, absolutely. And also just from getting momentum, I think it creates its own momentum. Blues did brilliantly last year overcoming that poor start, but, really in the end it cost them. If they'd finished top 4, they might have, who knows, they might have been a flag chance.
Let's talk opposition, teams to rise, and the brief, I guess, for teams to rise, usually a team outside the 8, but I guess it can be a team that made the finals and is going to rise to further heights. My team to rise this season is not a great stretch. Adelaide were very unlucky to miss out on finals last season. Ben Keys' goal from the boundary line was adjudicated to have touched the post and be behind, and the Crows missed the finals as a result, replaced by the Swans, who were the beneficiary of that decision. They were playing a good brand of footy towards the end of last season, and I expect them to continue along that trajectory. The forward line is clearly their strength with Walker, Fogarty, Tilthorpe, Rankine, Rochelle, Pedlar. They had 6 players, I think, that kicked more than 22 goals for the season, and the D's only had 5. And we scored 2 more goals than them from an extra 2 games. And however, I reckon their midfield and their defence perhaps their weakness. They were 14th for points from clearances and 9th for average points conceded with 81.8 points. I expect them to make the 8 this season, perhaps even pushing to go to top 4. We'll have to, time will tell. And we do have an early date with them, as I mentioned, in the gather round in round 4. B-Man, you also had Adelaide, but you had someone else as well. So if you might,
I had Adelaide, and with Adelaide last year, the thing that jumps out is on that team ratings, the championship data team ratings that I talked to before. They were the 5th ranked team at the end of last season, which is the biggest sort of gap between the ladder position and where this table has it. So 5th, and I think they finished 9th, didn't they? At the end of the home and away, heartbreaking 9th after that debacle for them, which if I was a Crows fan, I'd still be furious about. But they were ranked number 1 team in the AFL last year for attack. So the ranking system with 12.3 points as opposed to ours, 2.7 points. So significant, we were ranked 8th. So that was, and they were ranked 10th in defence. And so if they can improve their defence, I think they're the obvious team to rise up the ladder. And interestingly, George, the way they played was very much what you were talking about, that attacking and running, but they couldn't get their defensive system set up. It takes years, I think, to develop that system that is able, I imagine that the best all-team defences system can respond more quickly than ones that aren't so good. And they were constantly caught out on defence last year. If they can improve in that space, and fitness has got a lot to do with it, and speed over the ground as well. So someone like Windsor, his speed is so important. So I see them as a rise. And I've got a question mark out on the Cats. Take the point about their age. They have done well to bring in new players, but I was watching them the other day, and I was speaking to a friend who's a Cats fan. They've had a terrific pre-season with injuries. All of their key players Cameron's had a good pre-season. Hawkins has had a good pre-season. They've brought some younger players in who seem to be bringing some energy to the club. So they have such a leg up playing down, even though their record wasn't so great there last year, but they have such a leg up playing at Taxpayer Park. The stand's finished. It's going to be full of Cats fans every time they play. So a bit like Brisbane, they've got 8-9 games given to them basically, I think, through their homegrown advantage to an extent. So, yeah, I won't – I'm going with Crows in my team to rise, but a question mark on the Cats. I won't be shocked if they make the 8.
George?
I'm also favouring Adelaide to be the improver, and my second one is North Melbourne, but mainly for 2 years' time. I'll talk about Adelaide for a start. Firstly, though, as Andy mentioned, they were cheated of a final spot last year by AFL incompetence. They were the highest scoring side in 2023, so they've got the ability to kick winning scores. They've got one thing we as Melbourne supporters have probably forgotten about. Darren Burgess is now in his second year at Adelaide. He would have got a hold of them, made them a much fitter.
Isn't it third?
22, 23, this is 24, yeah.
Yeah. So they'll be a lot fitter than what they were two or 3 years ago, and certainly even from last year.
And it took him, I remember him saying it took him 3 years to get Melbourne to the fitness level that we were in 21.
Yeah. The other thing is their draw this year. Between rounds 6 and 16, so 10 games, they play 7 home games and a bye. So they only play 2 games away in that period between round 6 and 16. Their double-up games, they only play against 3 of last year's finalists, including Port, which is another home game for them. So they've got a very favourable draw in terms of the games that they play in Adelaide. So I can't see them not being in the 8 and probably even higher than that as the season goes on. Now, the reason I've chosen North as a backup for 2 years away, firstly, what happened off-field, Peter Jackson did a review of North structures. You probably remember Peter Jackson. He did a similar sort of job at Melbourne.
I thought he was a suit guy or cigarettes or something.
Yeah. They've got Todd Viney as their football manager. That sounds familiar as well. They've got Jen Watt as their CEO, who worked underneath Peter when he was at Melbourne. So the off-field side of things is looking very similar to what Melbourne was a couple of years ago. The really amazing thing about them, and a good comparison with what West Coast aren't doing, is they've kept all their picks. This year they had 5 picks under pick in the first 23 picks. Last year they had 2 in the top 5. They have got the same sort of talent build up as what we had at Melbourne when Roos first started to come in. You keep your top picks, you keep the talent, you give them a couple of years to come good, and all of a sudden you'll see North Melbourne start to rise up the ladder. I don't think they'll do too much this year because their defence is a bit thin. They've lost Mackay, although he wasn't a huge star of the defence, but they've lost him to Essendon. Clarkson's come in as the coach, and really, if there was ever an individual who's been kissed on the bum by arriving at the right time, it's Alistair Clarkson. I seem to recall at Hawthorn when he arrived in 2002, 2003, he already had 8 of the players that would take out a premiership 5 years later on his list, and he hadn't done anything. So, people like the Roughheads, Franklins, Hodges, Mitchells were all at the club before he even arrived, effectively. And the same sort of thing is now happening at North Melbourne. He's got a huge amount of talent. So they only won 3 games last year. Expect them to rise up slightly this year, but wait for next year when all these young kids start to hit their straps. But Adelaide's the one I reckon is going to make the big jump. North in 2 years' time.
And just on the Roos, it'll be interesting to see, because what you talked about, the faster, there's been talk about the Roos ball, like a version of Bazball, which is just go, 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 go.
Yeah.
Handball, move it, rapid, make sure you get forward, but we'll see how well that works. Hawks have been trying a similar model as well.
It was interesting watching the game against St Kilda with Ross Lyon playing the old style, kick it down the line sort of stuff, and North were running the Roos ball, which is just what we were talking about before. Fast, quick movement, move it across the ground one way, then the other. The Saints were all at sea when it worked. The North kept
when it works. That's the key thing.
North
Saints won the games. So.
North kept letting themselves down with errant handball.
But that's the risk. That's why that model is flawed in the finals, because turnovers, 70% of scores come from turnovers, and every time there's a handball and a link in the chain, it's an opportunity for a turnover. So that's the tension in that game plan.
And they're all young players. They'll get better at that sort of thing. So
Oh, and they've got some good young players. Wardlaw,
amazing.
𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃 looks a gun as well.
Wardlaw is going to be something very, very special.
Yeah.
Let's get into a bit of 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃 now and talk about the teams that are likely to fall. And this one could come back to bite me in the bum in a few days' time. But I think the Swans will be the team to fall this season. They have an excellent midfield: Gordon, Warner, Mills, Heaney, Parker, Lloyd. They have some very good defenders in McCartan and McInerney, Rampy, Blakely. They've added Grundy to their rucks and Taylor Adams and James Jordan to the midfield, but I just think their forward line's a little bit weak. Again, this could bite me in the bum on Thursday. I think they were very lucky to make the finals, as we discussed about their opposition last season. They did have a horrid start at the start of the season. They were one of those teams that I think around 14 had only won 4 or 5 games and then came back and had a good end of the season. They got a few injuries to some key midfielders going into the start of the season, and as I mentioned, Mills is going to miss half the season as well. They're my tip to fall this season, and hopefully it starts off on Thursday night. George, who is your team to fall?
Contrary to what Binman thinks, I think Geelong are going to fall even further. The reason for that is the ever-present argument that we've been using, certainly for the last couple of years. They've got 11 players over 30, and pretty well all of those players are in their best 22. Their age profile is not great. I think they've only got between 24 and 28. They've only got 9 that have played 50 games. They've got a real gap in the middle. They've got a real weight at the top end. They've got lots of young players, but they haven't played very much in the way of football.
That's a good point. They've got a big bubble in the middle, haven't they?
Yeah, big bubble in the middle. And the 11...
Speaking of West Coast, by the way, so have West Coast remarkably, given they've been down the bottom for 4 or 5 years. They're completely unbalanced demographically.
And they've done nothing about it.
No.
Anyhow, the other thing that's happened to Geelong is they won a premiership 2 years ago, yet last year they only had one All-Australian in the All-Australian side in Tom Stewart.
A bit similar to our season last in 22.
But all the ones that they were depending on, or ones who they had always depended on, the Hawkins, the Dangerfields, in the past, the Selwoods, they're not there anymore. The other thing is in their practice games, they've been running people like Dangerfield. He's lucky if he's played 5 minutes in a quarter. They're obviously protecting him because they have to, but that's not going to work during the season. They won't be able to play like that. I just can't see them staying up there to be any real challenge. They finished 10th last year. I can see them dropping down quite quickly as these older players just won't be able to keep up to the pace of the game.
Fantastic.
And my ones to fall, I'm with you, Andy, the Swans. I just think that Amati, Logan McDonald, I don't think either of them are going to be gun key forwards, maybe Logan McDonald.
Watch them kick a bag.
I mean, they've got some really gun players. Goulden, one of them, but we're going to get Goulden to the club. That's my hope. So he's going to be a demon. Good luck for Jordan. And I think, I just think that they, as you say, for all the reasons you said, Andy, they were lucky to make the 8 last year. And, I think that they rely, as George said last week, on Blakely off the halfback flank. They rely on individuals to play well, I think. And I mean, all teams do, but their defensive system isn't as strong as for instance, ours. So I think, that they'll fall. The Saints, I think that they overachieved last year. There's a big, case to say that, I'll be interested to see how they go to another level. They've also got some older players. Hill must be, he must be post 30. He's an important player to them. Obviously, Marshall is a terrific young ruckman, but I could see them falling away just because so many of their games are low scoring, and you need to be putting 100 points on in this first third of the season. If they don't get away to a good start in that critical first 8 games, I think they might struggle. And I know I said this last year, but I'm going back to the well. Is that I really think that the Pies will fall this season. Maybe not outside the 8. Maybe that's just wish casting a little bit. But, really for much similar reasons to George and the Cats is that, as I noted before, they got 9 players over 30, all of which are critical to the way they play footy. And you could see at the back end of last season that they were really struggling, some of those older players, with speed, and partly because of what they've introduced, the Pies. But leg speed is going to be super important. This is becoming more and more important. And Pendlebury can't run past his shadow, nor can Sidebottom. I think that they have had a really charmed run with injury. McStay out for full season is going to really make it difficult for them. I think they won the flag last year, but in my opinion, they were lucky to win it. I think that they will be the sliders.
I really hope we struggle and win a flag like they did last year. And another thing, you've been using them as a benchmark all night as examples.
Yeah, that's right. I have. Let's see about, I think they're on the way down and we're still up there. So, but
show me where Collingwood hurt you, big man.
Well, last year for a start, I can point to the ways. So,
all right, let's talk about the grand final. If it's not the D's, I guess this is sort of who our biggest competitors are. So, big man, you're not going to agree with this, and I don't know if they're. Well, I think Collingwood.
If you say Collingwood, I'm off.
Collingwood. The other one, I don't think are the best team or a contender, but I don't know. The AFL's dream grand final matchup may become a reality this season. It almost happened last year after the Blues.
Don't say it. Don't put it out there into the ether.
The Blues, they piled on the first 5 goals of the preliminary final, and I reckon the AFL were absolutely, I won't say it. I expect the Pies to be as formidable this season as they were last season. I know you don't agree, big man. I was bullish about the Blues before the practice match last week, but I have to remind myself that it was only a practice match. But the Blues do have 2 of the best forwards in the competition in Curnow and Mackay. They've got one of the best defenders in the league in Wiedering, and they have a very good mix of midfielders: Cripps, Wolf, Chera. I guess you can throw Kennedy and Hewitt in there. But the Blues, we've said it, they've got a very good one-wood. Can they find other ways to win?
Walsh out is a big blow for them, and so is Wiedering, and they've both had, not just being out, they've had injuries that it will have made it hard for them to build their tank over summer. So I think that's going to be a big hill for them to climb.
Martin's injured as well.
Martin's injured. Williams, I don't know where Williams is. I know he's coming back, but he's still probably a ways from being the player he was.
Yeah. All right, big man, you can go with your grand finalists.
I think Lions will be there and thereabouts again. That they're a good case to, what Goody said today on the in his interview is that you've got to be up there, you've got to be in it to win it, and keep putting yourself back in the frame. Lions have done that. They've got a massive advantage playing at the Gabba. Their record up there is phenomenal, and it's statistically better than Geelong's, but they also play better teams than Geelong. They get lots of blockbusters up there, but I think it's somehow 48 out of their last 51 games at the Gabba they've won, something nuts like that. It might even be 48 out of 50. And so they get a home final exactly like this year, gives them a saloon passage into the grand final. And I think the other team that I've got a lot of time for is the Giants, and they play a very, very similar game to us. There's no question their game plan has been lifted straight from Goody's game plan. But they've got some quality kicks. Josh Kelly being sort of chief among them. I think Jesse Hogan's been fantastic for them, really straightens them up. They seem to have built, they seem to have got a really good culture. Cameron, I thought, did a great job, even if he didn't get the results that, obviously didn't win him a flag, but they were pretty successful. They seem to have done what Suns haven't been able to do, which is create a real footy club culture. I really like the Giants. I hope they're successful. They really should have. They were unlucky. We speak about Melbourne's not winning their finals and the Pies being, and the Blues both being lucky to beat us. Well, the Pies really were super unlucky to win that game against the Giants. The Giants deserve that game. They were ripped off from memory. I think it was Toby Green's head almost got taken off near the end of the game. It should have got a free, or I can't quite. There was an incident right near the end of the game.
Umpire didn't call advantage when he shouldn't have.
Oh, that's right. Called advantage when, they were fantastic, and they've got both the quality and the game plan, and most importantly, they've got a defensive system that can take them all the way. So Lions, Giants, if it's not the D's, but I think it's going to be D's Giants.
I'm almost in total agreement with you there, Ben Man. Brisbane, I think, are the biggest challenge. It's too easy to forget that Brisbane were leading in the grand final with 10 minutes to play. And
really had chances earlier to put that game to bed, I thought. Yeah,
they could have easily been and they've lost. The important thing is they haven't lost anything from last year.
No.
And
they've got the young player coming back who did his ACL.
Ashcroft,
who is an absolute out-and-out star.
Yeah. They haven't lost anything. They also don't have any injuries at the moment compared to a lot of other clubs. So it's a good way to start the season. And I agree as well. The Giants were within 1 point of playing in a grand final this year, and we wouldn't have been talking about Collingwood.
Yeah.
They've finally hit their straps. They've got a depth of talent, all at the right age. Hogan's
good demographic, good mix, I think.
Hogan's made a huge difference to them up forward, and he's playing the best football he's ever played. They're right in the mix. They've got Taylor, who you just need a gun defender, don't you? And he's absolute gun defender. And Flynn in the ruck has become one of those, probably top 4 or 5 rucks in the league.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah, out of nowhere. Yeah. So it'll be. I think it'll be similar to last year. The top 4 will be the same teams that were there.
Well, they didn't finish top 4, though, did they?
No, but
at the end of the season,
they were within 1 point of a grand final. So,
but they finished at the end of the home and away. They finished 5th or whatever. But I could see. I think they'll finish top 4 this year.
Yep.
All right, let's talk Brownlow medal. And for most of the season last year, Nick Dacos was the rampaging favourite to win the Brownlow medal in only his second season. In their round 21 loss to the Hawks, he suffered a hairline fracture and missed the final month of the season. I think it was only 3 games though. Had he played those last 3 games, he would have taken Charlie home. I think he only lost by 3 votes. He averaged 31 disposals last season, and unless teams start to tag him, which I think is unlikely, I reckon he's going to continue to sustain that form and win the Brownlow medal.
What is with your bloody Pies love? This is Demonland, not Pieland.
I'll add to that.
I don't want to hear it, Andy.
Petrarca or Oliver, because I think they'd steal votes off each
There's
other.
two of them.
Right. Well, my prediction, it's funny you should mention those two players, is my prediction in a big, big week in news. It's going to be the redemption arc. First part of the redemption narrative will be Track and Oliver will both win the Brownlow, and they'll tie on 32 points to both take. Clary will take home the Charlie, and so will Track. And then the redemption story reaches its climax 6 days later with the D's beating the Giants in a blowout at the G.
And who gets Norm Smith for that?
Track, and big debate, but Track gets it in squeaks past Oliver.
All right, let's leave fantasy land, which I hope is disappointment, and then to see what George has to say.
I've got a simple answer. 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃.
Yep.
I thought he was cheated out of the Brownlow last year. The difficulty is the Brownlow votes are awarded by the umpires, and they almost invariably give more votes to the winning team. 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃 was streets ahead of any other player in the competition last year. He is absolutely at the height of his prowess. He dragged the Bulldogs to a premiership a long time ago now, but he was the single factor that got them over the line. He is playing the best football that you could possibly see at the moment, even in the practice match on the weekend.
He's a beautiful kick, but can they win enough games though?
That is the problem. Like I said, the umpires give 3-2-1 based on win second best, but 𝗟𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗃 is just one of those remarkable footballers who doesn't get the credit that he should, simply because the Bulldogs don't win enough games these years.
I've got another prediction, Andy. So on the win thing, George, if we win, say, 19, 20 games, then that's plenty of votes for Track and Oliver to go around. But I've got some other predictions, Andy. There'll be mid-season losses due to fatigue from games, from the cumulative impact of playing 10, 12, 13 games, and, of course, loading, causing Demonland to do its now annual meltdown. So that's one of my prediction. Another prediction is David King will fall and then rise and then fall and then rise and then fall, and who knows where it will end up. And my final prediction for the season is for me not to be able to remain sanguine about the appalling standard of football media and analysis and losing my patience with it. That's my hope. I hope I don't. I'm on a media blackout this season. I'm going to see how far I go. I'll do well if I don't end up exploding at some stage at the state of footy media.
All right, well, I think we've done over 2 hours now, so I think we're going to leave it there for tonight. We'll be back on Monday night at 8:30 p.m. on Demonland.com to review our opening match for the season. Thank you to my co-hosts, George and Bimman. As always, I couldn't do the show without you. Thank you to our caller, Kieran from Canberra. Thank you to our 5-star reviewers, Andy in Canada and Ellie in Israel. Your questions and comments are an integral part of the show, but... we did have a couple. So I think it was Buck Naked, 𝗟𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗃 in, the Chief. Who else? It was and Nairobi D put in a couple of questions. We'll be back with questions from you guys next week.
And thanks to 𝗟𝗀𝘀𝘀𝘁 in the chat room as well, Andy.
Again, I was remiss. Thanks, 𝗟𝗀𝘀𝘀𝘁. Appreciate you listening and contributing to the show. So thank you as well to our loyal listeners who dial us up on Apple Podcasts every week. So don't forget to leave your 5-star reviews and a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll read it out on the show next week. Go Demons!
Go Red Leggers!
Come on, demons.